Greetings and welcome back, Monsterites. Special effects, more specifically computer-generated versus practical effects, are often a topic of debate, if not so, then at least ones that raise strong opinions. The end goal in the field ultimately striving for realism and strong, suitable reactions. I always agreed with Guillermo del Toro's position on going full practical and giving a film that handmade feel with CGI as touch-ups to sell the realism of the idea to the viewer. But as not just technology advances, but our skills at mimicking reality, I'm now beginning to see that this formula can be mixed and shifted around. With the complexity of the beloved werewolf transformation, we can explore what the place of relevancy is and will be for both practical and CG effects within the film industry. It's a great perspective to approach this design work from, as the necessities of particular genres, such as in this case horror, action horror, or even fantasy, propose different atmospheres. A production's budget and involved skill set and level may also be another point of priority in the approach of this most dramatic of moments. And finally, hearty competition and interest within these creative fields is sure to keep these various systems of creation alive and well for years to come. The growing usage of computers and programs doesn't mean that other means and techniques of mimicry aren't developing as well, such as robotics and new synthetic material inventions. Before we jump into the thick of it, I'd like to give a quick shout out to my Monsterite supporters at Patreon for adding to the fuel that keeps this monster lovers carnival rolling. That means me making these videos. Link below to perks for your consideration of helping out World of Monsters. When fans or moviegoers critique an approach taken for a werewolf transformation, they often don't acknowledge the atmosphere reasoning behind the style. Van Helsing's werewolf transformation displayed this factor brilliantly. Now, I'm not saying the transformation was perfect in any way, although many fans adore it. I am saying that the chosen method suited the film type very well, which is action horror. If we examine this moment in the film, which I actually have a while ago in a video specifically dedicated to it, we immediately see the computer-generated implications. I praise the technique here for two reasons. One, the peeling away at the skin as if it were melting wax was pretty unique, especially with the second reasoning, which was the clarity of the purpose for this function in an action movie. It was fast and furious without the gore and prolonged moments of agony that you'd see in, well, not action horrors. This is similar to what you'd expect in video games where you play as a werewolf, you shift because you're forced to or need to, and then carry on, not for an aggravating few minutes that pulls you out of the gameplay. The key purpose is therefore the werewolf form thereafter and what the character does during this phase. On the other paw though, taking this scene from The Howling, we see a long, treacherous transformation process. The goal here is showcasing the process itself as a shocking change of anatomy to add to the darkness and thrill of the horror movie. The approach here is practical as one, CGI was not yet developed enough at this time for a scene like this, and two, the main point here, to express the nastiness and the gore of the situation. Practical effects are excellent, even still in displaying wet and fleshy organic forms in motion. It has taken CGI some time to perfect this type of creation, and even these days, with as quality as it is, practical effects may work as a better substitution. Therefore, if you're looking for a quick shift rather than a transformation such as you'd see in Twilight, or a change that is less gross and dramatic due to being purposed for a younger audience such as in Harry Potter, CGI can be great for moving body masses around and blending them smoothly. But if you desire that gooiness of what would probably actually take place if one were to change form to this degree, then practical effects alone in combination with CGI, or CGI alone if done with painstaking attention to detail, could be the best options. A good example of this is the Wolfman remake of 2010, where the challenge was to showcase a dreadful transformation through full CGI. The point here is that either method of effects can work for either genre of film, but certain approaches can be more easily, smoothly implemented for a desired effect. Now, looking back at the first two examples I mentioned in Van Helsing and The Howling, these transformations still lacked in total believability or realism, as in their own rights they still weren't top-notch, but certainly admirable, especially for their times. With today's quality of high-budget CGI work, the plastic dry look of the flesh and its detachment from the main frame could look much more realistic. And in The Howling's case, with a more advanced practical methodology, the stationary and comically long bubbling transformation here could be much more dynamic in its presentation. Bear in mind, Van Helsing came out in 2004, and The Howling in 1981. Here's an example with a touch of both methods. In Bad Moon, we see practical effects in the makeup, while the shifts and bumps are aided by digitized animations and blending. Compared to the film's Werewolf, the shift was quite lackluster. So how could this have been done better? Well, budget may have a lot to say in this, but stay tuned for my thoughts on the best tactics for different conditions at the end. Budget does play a big part in the determination of what approach to take for a movie's special effects scenes. It is pretty commonly known how expensive CGI can be, as it isn't just the technology that is costly here, but the manpower behind the productions, as the process can be incredibly tedious. Consequently, a cheaper practical approach could be much better suited for a smaller production. These two options will stay available for creatives, but who knows how far they will advance individually, or if some sort of third option will eventually arise. Also, factoring under here is the actual availability of a person or persons and their skill level, especially for a producer under a modest budget. But nonetheless, quote ranges on this, as with everything else these days, are expanding and competition continues to spread. And art, as anything in this capitalistic world, is extremely competitive. Therefore, as my third point to how CGI and practical effects will continue to be relevant, is the creative competition itself. You will always have artists, hopefully, that express expertise in various styles, just as you have collectors of all sorts of things, antique and new. This healthy and exciting competition is part of our DNA and will continue to thrive, as there will always be some creator trying to one-up another, while yet another trying to prove one method above the other. On top of this, our individuality has proven that there will always exist a passion for any type of style, no matter how unconventional it is. Like, for example, stop motion. At this point in our history of entertainment, we know stop motion isn't the most realistic option or just best option for a film because of whatever reason, but the style is still beloved by many and is now in a sort of genre of its own. Transformation sequences are so versatile that it's a great area for artists to flex their creative potential and abilities in. This competition of some designers building digitally while others getting their hands dirty sculpting Chavant clay will continue to exist, at least to a degree. Will it shift and one side overpower the other? Well, that is what I'd like to address in my conclusion here. I do think that both computer-generated and practical effects will always be useful in many types of scenes, but more specifically in werewolf transformations due to the variation of atmospheres that could involve the scene, the budget for the production, and the entertainment industry's never-ending creative competition. Although as technology and shortcuts continue to develop, I could see CGI overtaking practical, mostly because of the competition and budget. We've already been seeing this for the last 2 decades or so, as the Sci-Fi Channel has been taken over by movies and TV shows consisting of a lot of very fake CGI implementations. So sure, it had a rough start as it started being overused, but the fact is it's still making headway. As a moviegoer, monster lover, and creator/creative myself, I get a thrill out of seeing a portion of a film where I can't distinguish what's CGI and what's not. We've finally arrived at this point. It took a while, but from our limited viewpoint as an audience, the scenes have disappeared. Now this still has to be done very cleverly and by the studios with the greatest resumes, but it is doable. Visuals will continue to be perfected, and more importantly now for the smaller producers, software shortcuts programmed, for example, that will allow for quicker recreation of flowing grass blades or the complex imagery involved in a building's explosion. The more shortcuts and less time and heavy labor required, the cheaper the costs. Is it then possible that eventually practical will only be featured in practical effects stylized movies, such as we again see with stop motion? I do think there's a strong possibility that CGI could take over this much, but something to keep in mind is the influence of other emergent technology, such as virtual reality. Once VR becomes commonplace, production companies may find it more useful and economical to use practical studios for real furniture, outdoor scenery, etc., just real content with tons of cameras picking up every angle, rather than digitally creating something that will have to be powered down for the new tech, in turn exposing the artificiality of it all. We'll just have to see as things progress. Finally, here are my opinions on how to best approach multifaceted organic situations, such as a transformation from one being to another. Initially, I would say both practical and computer-generated effects in sync would be best, but budget and atmosphere more clearly defines the nuances here. So say you're working on a low-budget horror. For the transformation sequence here, I would go with practical as one, it's cheaper, and two, you get a good amount of content from the nature of the procedure, since it could be approached a variety of ways. Furthermore, the unpredictability, while depending on various materials, can create for happy accidents that may only add to the realism and grossness. I do hold a bias here though, as in general I prefer bad practical effects to bad CGI, as in unnatural computer-created model and animation can quickly pull me out of the moment, while an amateurish practical attempt may pull me away from the realism of the situation, but not from the moment in the film as much. I can more appreciate the approach here taken. Even if it's comical, it's a more positively amusing situation just due to the actual physical application of it and how we can relate to that as we deal with all sorts of materials and ingredients in real life. Also, practical is more nostalgic for me, especially with over-the-top gory horrors. As you can see so far, this clearly relates to the examples I offered at the beginning of the video. If going with an action flick or fantasy adventure where we need a quick shift, I'd go with CGI, as it can so slickly animate a transition from one form to another, like we see with Hulk.
I'm always angry.
But if we're talking high budget, I'd like to see a smart mix of both, so smart that as the audience, I'd have no idea which shot has which. Recently, I did a review for our patrons on the movie Warcraft, and I was astonished at the efforts put forth into the visuals here. It was one of the first films where I really questioned what I was looking at, and after watching some making of clips, was pleasantly surprised that some of my assumptions were wrong. The movie had a huge budget, and you can totally see experience where it went as you watch it. This is what I'd like to experience in a werewolf movie or scene. Let's take The Wolfman 2010, one of the best werewolf films out there, unless you're just really not into the whole Wolfman look. This adventure horror is a good example of both styles of effects used. The monster himself was a real creation, but perfected with CGI digitigrade legs.
But he's got kind of like dog legs.
Yeah, well, he's a werewolf.
Yeah, but he's running on two legs.
Yeah,
with dog legs.
He's a biped.
The transformation itself, though a great work of CGI, was unfortunately 100% CGI, which Rick Baker was not initially a fan of. The film had various production issues, and some, such as time constriction, led to this decision. I'm fine with some CGI being utilized for this scene, but for detailed shots, such as a foot breaking out or this finger action, I would have preferred practical for the realism, as the CGI here is not flawless. It was 2010 after all. As for the face, I think a touch of CGI on top of some practical motions and progressive periodic makeup additions, with it overall remaining real throughout the sequence, would have been perfect and more true to the original Wolfman's transformation, as it would require the actor to return into the same exact position to finish the whole process. I think this would have seriously earned this film some points back, as the general consensus seemed to be upset over this matter. But enough about The Wolfman. Go watch it. I am a fan of effective quality effects, no matter how they are accomplished. Hence, if I haven't made it clear enough, I don't see a need for there to be a battle between the two, especially not with what is possible now. Now then, if you're a werewolf fan, be sure to stay subscribed, as eventually I'll be dropping a video of every werewolf transformation of every movie ever, just like I have showcasing every movie werewolf since 1913 to present year. By the time you watch this, it might already be up, so you may want to stop by our channel. Now I have to thank Christian, Toby, Rain, Dante, Tammy, Ramin, Cloud, Joseph, Patrick, Grimmuser, Tim, and all my patrons. For other content such as more unhinged videos with me, or just to support the weird side of YouTube I inhabit here, please look over our Patreon page and see if it's something you'd be interested in being a part of for really less money than you probably spend subconsciously every month. Hell, many folks probably a week. Anyway, let me know your thoughts on this topic. Is there really anyone for practical to completely die and be replaced by digital? Do you have any other interesting thoughts on how these things could change or evolve in the far future? Until the next video, I have been Monster Master Arthur.